Like, so in the past, I have covered on many occasions actually the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular 10.7, which I'll come on to in just a second. But even before I touched upon the Sustainable Development Goals, in the past I've talked about the fact that Juncker, for example, amongst others, have mentioned safe and legal pathways to reach Europe in response to the so-called migrant crisis. An article here, for example, from the 11th, the 28th, of November 2017, Juncker calls for migrants to have legal ways or legal pathways to reach Europe, going on to say that we have to provide those who want to come, are able to come, and whose situation makes it possible for them to come with legal pathways to get to Europe. Juncker told the German broadcaster that he believes that if we don't offer legal ways of emigrating into Europe and emigrating within Europe, we will be lost. You know, and we go back to the Sustainable Development Goals, 10.7, as I said, and it says quite clearly right here, facilitate orderly, safe, regular and responsible migration and mobility of people, including through the implementation of planned and well-managed migration policies. Facilitate, safe, legal, orderly, whatever you will. Just bear that in mind, because more and more, as we've seen, especially in the last few months, with the uptick in pricks coming over here from Calais and Dunkirk on their wee dinghies that we're supposed to believe is all at the behest of smugglers, I beg to differ on that front. But the solution, time and time again, whether it be the drownings that may or may not have occurred in the Mediterranean, or whether it be the perils of the Calais migrant squatters and their plight, trying to reach here. The solution, the suggestion to rectify these issues is not to stop them coming over in the first place and crack down on the so-called trafficking network that's getting them here. It's to provide safe and legal pathways. Time and time again. You know, it begins to ring bells when you've watched and you've listened to this stuff for as long as I have. So with that in mind, we have the Scottish Refugee Council, the latest to jump on the fucking bandwagon, pardon my French. Channel crossings. And what do we have? Yeah. So, it says here that our media officer Chris is a former volunteer and trustee of Refugee Information, or Infobus, sorry, an NGO operating in North France across Europe to support people on the move. On the move, eh? Here he responds to recent negative press coverage of people crossing the channel illegally, sitting on their fat arses all day long in Calais, squatting illegally, with the intention of entering Britain illegally. They're not refugees, they're African for the most part, and even the ones that aren't African. Let's not forget the ones that aren't African. They're still not refugees. They're not, yeah, they've got an asylum application in their butt pocket, but they're not asylum seekers either. You know? Anyhow, let's see what they have to say. Negative press coverage of people arriving in the UK, across the English Channel has ramped up in recent weeks. And why has it ramped up in recent weeks? Why has there been negative coverage in recent weeks that has ramped up? Because there's been an uptick in people crossing the channel in recent weeks. Illegally. Anyhow, the number of people arriving in small boats on the Kent coast daily has suddenly become headline news. I wonder why. And you know the laugh of it is, though, that Nigel, I've been covering this stuff for ages now. You know, I'm not tooting my own horn. The point is, though, like, this isn't new to me. But Nigel Farage drew attention to it, to his credit. He still buys into the narrative that, you know, they're here at the behest of, human trafficking and whatnot, to a degree. You know, he did come out and expose the fact that there was a bit of, you know, pasta parcel, if you will, going on between the French authorities and the British. But, you know, for the most part, he still kind of buys into this narrative that they're here because they parted with some cash, you know, these Africans from fucking Senegal and whatnot, coming over here with $5 grand in their butt pocket to pay some smuggler. But that's here nor there. The point is, though, this has been going on for a long time, and the media wouldn't have been talking about it at all if Nigel Farage hadn't brought attention to it. They had to then speak about it. This has been going on since at least December 2018. We cannot turn away from the plight of people across one of the most dangerous shipping lanes in the world. The plight. You know, the plight. It's just madness. According to Refugee Women's Centre, an organisation working on the ground in Calais and Dunkirk, mass evictions and worsening living conditions in northern France are coinciding with this increase in people attempting to cross the channel by boat. Is that so? So, I mean, there's a few things that we could effectively pin that on. Could it be that there's an influx of people? Could it be that, you know, there's far too many people in these camps and not enough of them are getting over on a daily basis. AIDS Group on the ground estimate that there are over 1,000 people currently displaced at our border in Calais. This is not a new phenomenon. The numbers of displaced people sleeping rough in Calais began to grow in the 1990s, although the situation really registered in most people's consciousness in 2015 when there was a surge. You know? The odd 1 or 2, the odd 15, the odd 40. It's irrelevant in comparison to what we're seeing now. 2015, a rather relevant number in the grand scheme of things, or a rather relevant year, I should say, because that's when the migrant crisis, the refugee crisis back then began. Anyhow, it says here that the camp was evicted in 2016 with thousands of people dispersed across France, but even since the eviction of the jungle, quote unquote, there has consistently been around 1,000 people displaced at our border. Our border, eh? Calais is a deliberately hostile place for people seeking safety. But again, here we go with the assumptions. So the assumption is that they're all seeking safety. If they were that desperate to seek safety, if they were that desperate to, claim a better life for themselves away from the persecution and war, then they would apply for asylum in France. But they don't. They specifically, as most of these individuals do, they traverse the European continent picking exactly where they wish to go, whether that be Germany, whether that be Sweden, or whether that be the UK. The problem in the case of the UK, however, is the fact that there is a body of water, hence why they start to build up and create little fucking squatting centres for themselves. And we get little arseholes like the Scottish Refugee Council spokesperson in this case, or the media in general, or the half-bald blue-haired feminists sitting there making out that they are all, based on assumptions of course, fleeing the perils of war and whatnot, claiming that these people are seeking a better life, claiming that these people are desperate and vulnerable and we need to do more for them. Well, I'm sorry, but we don't. We fucking don't. If Macron won't do anything for them, why should we? Anyway, it then says that relentless evictions and intimidation tactics in northern France deter people from wanting to stay in France and creates the conditions for people to try and get to the UK at any cost. I mean, it's just such bullshit. And again, gives credence to the point I was making previously in relation to them not actually being refugees. Because if they were refugees, they would be thankful for being in France, a safe country, but they don't want to stay there. Remind me again when refugees were given the ability to pick and choose where they flee to. And even if there was a time and a place where that was set in stone in legal terms, that again would be open to exploitation like it is right now. The UK has failed for decades to provide a system of safe legal means for people to seek asylum or to enable people to reunite with their families. Current global resettlement schemes are only for people from certain nationalities. The only route for anybody else to claim asylum is to find a way to get to the country, taking increasingly dangerous risks to do so. Despite the UK border being in Calais, people can't claim asylum in the UK from here, and the French asylum system is difficult to access in the region too. It's just bullshit. Traverse Europe. How did they get to France in the first place? It's often touted that people claim asylum in the first country that they reach. This is a deliberate misreading of the Dublin regulation, which already puts a disproportionate strain on EU border states to deal with people arriving in Europe. Only 34,000 people are being held in squalid camps in Greece, and people are dying every single day in the Mediterranean and in detention centres in Libya. We cannot turn away. People have the right to seek asylum from persecution in any country. Nobody would put themselves or their children in a small boat in the Channel unless they thought it was safer than what they were leaving behind. But the point is, though, they are traversing the English Channel because they know damn well that they will be able to obtain access to the country. They're not taking it upon themselves and risking it all because they know themselves that once they are spotted by either French officials, if they're far enough out, or British officials, they will be taken here, and the likelihood of them being deported is marginal. So it's not a case of them putting it all on the line and hoping for the best. No, it's not the case. At all. At all. However, the media's attack on the vulnerable groups of people is working. The daily headlines are creating the idea of a crisis, building the assumption that our border controls aren't good enough, that our Home Office policies are too lenient. We know this is not the case. People are being scapegoated in order to justify an even more hostile environment that doesn't fucking exist. It doesn't exist. It doesn't. You just need to look at the stats of the amount of non-EU immigration that's been entering the UK year on year for many a year now. It's ridiculous. There is no hostile environment. And if there was a hostile environment, these people wouldn't be coming here in the first place. Anyway, we should be feeling empathy. You can't teach empathy. Just putting that one out there. We should all be down at the shore in Folkestone, offering our hands, pulling people out of the way, as well the Africans, Abdul and the Africans from Senegal, the Congo, Somalia, etc., etc. They're supposed to be here for the Syrian resettlement scheme. We're just supposed to assume. We're supposed to pander to these people and show empathy. It is easy for the populist press to just tar people with the same brush, illegal migrants, but you want us to tar them all as people fleeing from persecution and war. It's not how this works. It's fascinating how they wish it would work. It's fascinating watching how their minds operate. Illegal migrants, China migrants, but behind the headlines, these are all individuals. Yet they are. They're all individuals, so they've all got individual stories. So to just assume that they're all fleeing the perils of war, to just assume that they're all refugees and or asylum seekers, is just as fucking bullshit as what you're claiming here. People who have people who have fled war, persecution, and terror. What about the ones that haven't? What about the ones that haven't, though? People who have experienced torture and human rights abuses, but what about the ones that haven't? People who need safe legal routes to safety, which don't leave them risking their lives on a small boat in the channel. People who, in the face of the worst this world has to offer, choose hope and life. See, again, though, it's anecdotal, and again, you are pinpointing, or you're trying to suggest that every single one of these individuals has fled for one of the various reasons you have given in your examples. But you don't, or you have an issue with the press talking about illegal migrants. You have a problem with them being tarred with the same brush, but you're happy to do the same so long as it suits the agenda you're trying to portray. We welcome this. Of course you do, dickhead. We must enable people to seek safety as safely as possible and ensure that people are properly supported once they are here. Priti Patel has recently announced plans for a more compassionate Home Office, this comes just days after visiting Calais to announce plans for a new joint intelligence cell and a shared commitment to returning both to France with French Interior Minister in a move which will cost the UK millions of pounds. Anyway, so it says here, we call on the Home Office to provide more safe and legal routes for people to seek safety in the UK, included but not limited to a mechanism for people to claim asylum in the UK from our border in France, a system of humanitarian visas for people to claim asylum from overseas, an extension of the resettlement scheme beyond 2021 are fucking convenient. Separated children in the UK should be allowed to sponsor their parents or siblings to join them. Existing legal safe routes must be safeguarded. And for those who have newly arrived in the UK, they must have access to a just and fair asylum system and be properly supported to rebuild their lives. Nobody is safe until we are all safe. Yeah. Safe. Legal pathways. Safe. Legal pathways. Peace.